It's hard. We're going to talk about the Toronto Raptors. It's taken me a while to get the courage to do this. Michael Bolton, he helped me through it.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and in honor of Woj retiring, this podcast is brought to you by agent Mark Bartelstein of Priority Sports. I'm not even sure that's his agency. We're also brought to you, or I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at LockedOnFantasyBasketball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Now through to September the 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket thanks to YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com right now to get started. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and we are available on all platforms. So give us the old thumb up, the double bang, and leave your comments down below. We're here to talk about the Toronto Raptors, a team that I hate, a country that I hate, a city that I detest, filled with the worst hive of villainy and scum you could possibly imagine. But they are, unfortunately, one of the 30 teams in the NBA, so we do need to cover them professionally, and that's what I've always done. Raptors. Let's talk about their fantasy appeal. I actually went early on that. That's what she said. We're going to just quickly update on the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl. I have sent out some invitations to the Roto League already. There is a link in the show notes, audio-wise and video-wise, to enter the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl. We've got head-to-head categories. We've got points. We've got Roto. $50 entry, 12-team divisions, big, large prize for the full battle royale at the end. They're slow drafts that begin October the 2nd. Draft orders will be sent out in advance. Just don't worry about it. That will come. But the Roto I've filled up. There was 120 spots, and that is full. And I sent those invites out to Roto yesterday. So have a look, because I wanted to see what the demand was. And I think I might have to extend out that Roto, because there is a lot of people applying for the Roto League. So if you haven't got a Roto invite, don't panic too much. I think I'm going to extend that Roto League out. At the moment, we've got 120 teams in it. I think I'm going to push it to 200 or 200-ish around that mark. So just keep an eye on that and see what comes out. But still, look, if you want Roto and you want in, and if you've got the preferences on that form, which leagues you want, remember your first preference, put what you want, and I'll try and accommodate that. If you want all three, you put all three. If you want Roto, and then if you can't get Roto, you want head-to-head, and if you can't get head-to-head, you want points, put them in that preference, 1, 2, 3. And then I'll attempt to accommodate you. So don't think that you can't get in the Roto League, because I am considering either expanding or chucking another full 120 league division out there. So that is possible still. Like I said, we are talking Raptors. We are talking about the fantasy value on this team, which is a team that is obviously, they were in flux. They made big moves last season, changed the whole dynamic of their team. All the big pieces came together at the end of the year and then barely played. So it is going to be a hard one to try and figure out exactly what we're going to expect. Now, I do think that this is a relatively straightforward starting lineup, unlike the last two, which were the Jazz and the Wizards, which are a little bit harder to predict. Immanuel Quickley is going to start. RJ Barrett is going to start. Scottie Barnes is going to start. And Jakob Poeltl is going to start. Those four absolute lock guarantees. Lock guarantees. I think at shooting guard, we saw this down the stretch. He started. It is the prestige penis, Gradey Dick. He slot into that position with Gary Trent gone. There is that opening that Dick can fill. And I think that's what's going to happen. Now, they still have the $25 million of Bruce Brown on the books. They did draft Gary Trent III in Jakob Poeltl, who no shot he starts. I think they want to see what their Dick can do. And I think that he will play that position, and whether that's 34 minutes or 27 minutes, I'm not sure. But I think it'd be, I don't know if outrageous or irresponsible is the right word, but it would be pretty weird if Dick isn't in that position. So I think we're going Quickley, Dick, Barrett, Barnes, and Poeltl. We all love a quick Dick backfield, and it's not football, it's backcourt. That's the word. And that is, I think, what we're going to get in this starting group for the Toronto Raptors. Let's talk undervalued players. You might call them sleepers. Call them whatever you want. But we're here to talk about what I think, or who I think, are going to be those players. And there's quite a bit on this team that I think is currently just still being a little bit overlooked. Immanuel Quickley sets up to me as a pretty strong value pick, especially when we're talking ESPN. Now, his Yahoo numbers have come in enough that I don't look at that as a strong super value spot, but Quickley's ADP on ESPN is 86. He's ranked for category leagues at number 80 as well. And of course, that ADP for Quickley slides across both formats, and he's 86 for points leagues too, which I just think is too low. Now, Quickley only played 29 minutes a night last season. We look at his full year numbers. 17, 4 rebounds, 5 assists. The defensive numbers are bad. 0.7 steals is bad. 43% from the field is not ideal. 85 from the line is good, and 2.5 triples is really good. And it is really, it is difficult to fully grasp how things work for him like once he was in Toronto, because the assist numbers rose, the minutes rose, but also Barnes wasn't there for most of that time. Now, Barnes, Barrett, and Quickley, they only played about 450 minutes together. And when we looked at those numbers, like, the numbers are solid enough. His assist rate was still good. His usage was higher than Barnes and less than Barrett's. He's still good, but is he a 7.5 assist player, Immanuel Quickley? Is he a 5.5 assist player if Barnes is running things like more of the Jamal Murray mold of point guard? Is he a 43% shooter, or can he push to 45? Or does he go to 41 with a larger role, a larger minutes role than what he was used to from last season? Like, those numbers are fine. 17, 4, and 5, 2.5 threes, 43 and 85. They're good numbers. I think he's got a real shot, Immanuel Quickley, this season of being a top 50 player. Like, a huge, huge shot at doing that. In fact, I think it's probably likely. Like, Yahoo's got him in at 55, and his ADP on Fantrax is in at 49. And yeah, that's fine. That does give you an element of not plausible deniability. That's the wrong term, but it gives you a little bit of downside in that. But like, if he finishes a top 30 player, I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't take him there, absolutely. He's like a 5th roundish, 50 to 60 sort of guy that I would draft, maybe in the 40s, maybe. But there's risk. Like, what if the shooting's worse? What if the usage, and he's the 3rd clear guy behind Barnes and Barrett? What if he doesn't get to that 7 assists and he only gets 5 assists? Which, again, I think is unlikely. I think 6.5 to 7 is reasonable. But if it's on the downside of that, that's where we get to some concern. Jakob Poeltl is another one that I think is undervalued in a lot of different spots. His Yahoo ADP is 96. His ESPN ADP is 105 for category leagues, and rank is 101. His Fantrax ADP is 96. And even in points leagues, his ADP is 105, obviously on ESPN, and he's ranked 99. I think he's better than that. I think that Poeltl is obviously, we know some of the downsides of what Jakob Poeltl brings, and that's mainly free throws. He's never going to be he's not going to hit threes. He averaged 11 points and 8.6 rebounds last season, 0.7 steals, 1.5 blocks, big field goals, 66%, terrible free throws, 55. He's 29, so he's on that sort of cusp of, is he getting worse? Is he getting better? It's the 26 minutes that's annoying for me from what he did last season, because he should have been playing more. Now, they shouldn't be giving minutes to Chris Boucher. I don't think Jonathan Mobo or Rich Shomshi are going to be cutting into his playing time. Bruno Fernando is there as well. But the big one that's, I guess, a small question mark is, how do they utilize Kelly Olynyk? Poeltl has had foul trouble issues before, but last season, once they traded Precious Achiuwa, which was weird because, and I banged on about this all through the season, is that Poeltl, even when Achiuwa was pushed out of the rotation in Toronto, Poeltl's minutes didn't go up. And they traded Achiuwa away, and Poeltl's minutes went up. And it looked like they went up because Achiuwa was gone, but that wasn't the case. But anyway, he started playing 30 minutes a night, 31 minutes a night. And if he plays 31 minutes a night, Poeltl smashes these numbers. Yeah, you've got to be concerned about free throw percentage, absolutely. But he's on this contract, second year of the extension. Olynyk is much older, and he's going to be like a backup 4/5. Poeltl might not play 30, but I think he gets more than the 26, and I think he beats these numbers that are put out there at the moment for his for his ranks and his ADPs. Again, even in points leagues, I think there is value in Jakob Poeltl, and he's probably sliding a little bit too far at the moment. Today's episode is brought to you by the Game Time app. When we are talking about events, they're fun. Why else would you do it? You want to go to see live sport, music, comedy, theatre. Sometimes getting the tickets is annoying. What's this process? This is taking forever. What are these prices? What am I going to do? So many options. I'm confused. Well, Game Time's got a new feature. They got features all the time. They got features coming out of everywhere. And now, their new feature is called Game Time Picks, where they find the best value tickets, and that's what they show you. The other ones, they're there. You can find them later on, but they just highlight the good ones. You pair that with their flash deals, the fact that their pricing drops the closer you get to Game Time, the fact that you've got the views from your seat, the zone deals to save you money as well. Every little feature that Game Time chucks out there is why Game Time is your choice to go and get tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create the account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, we haven't gone through all of those undervalued players, so let's go back and do that now because one of the names on this list is Rowan Barrett Jr. And we're going to he is going to be who goes under the lens on this show, RJ Barrett. So I won't talk too much about him here, but he's always one of those better points versus categories player. And at the moment, his value in a points league is too low. It's way too low. Yahoo's got him ranked at 101, and his ADP is 101. He is significantly better than that in a points league, Rowan Barrett. Like, just so much better than that. That's not even close to where his value lies in a points league. And understanding how to exploit those differences, which don't get reflected in sites like Yahoo, who don't have the separate sort of rankings and ADP systems. This is a top 50-ish points league player. ESPN's got his ADP at 97, and their ADP goes across all drafts. But they also updated their rankings for points leagues. They put that out yesterday, and he's at 96. Now, the system on ESPN, the scoring system, is not as favorable to him, but he's still like 30 spots better than that. I think he's a 50s guy on Yahoo, a 60s guy on ESPN. This is thievery, absolute stealing to be able to get Barrett at these spots in a points league. Absolute stealing. Let's talk about the other guy that I think is a little bit undervalued, and that's Gradey Dick, because he's just ranked at an insane position. Dick is ranked 315th on Yahoo, and in categories and points, I'll put a fair chunk of money that I don't have, but I'd put it down to suggest that he will beat that number. On ESPN, his category rank is 275 and his points rank is 224. Pretty confident, again, that he's going to be able to beat that. Not that, he was awesome or anything like that last season. It was his rookie year and he's still working through what he needed to do, and his game is not always the most fantasy-friendly game. But that's okay, because we're looking for a second-year bump. We're looking for more usage. He had 18 usage in 21 minutes. He averaged 8.5 points with 2 rebounds and an assist. He shot 43 and 86, so the 86 is great. What if the 43 becomes 46? What if that becomes 12 points with 2.5 threes, 4 rebounds? He's a pretty good rebounder. Not going to be a big assist player, but they also don't. After Quickley and Barnes, there's not huge ball movers on this team. So I think there's a lot here for Dick to be able to provide for us. And like at those ranking positions, his ADP is different because once you get into the ADPs of 140, it's like 2 people take him there and he doesn't get drafted in 90% of leagues. Those numbers become less reliable. But where he currently sits in those ranking spots, where you've got to scroll all the way down to the bottom of your draft boards on ESPN and on Yahoo, you've got to go down. You've got to look at all those. You find him. Where is he? Where is he in these positions? Well, there's tremendous value. I'm just taking a look. So Dick's ADP is 156 on Yahoo. Like I said, I think I guessed this number. He's been drafted in 2% of leagues. 2 is an insanely low number. Now, you might not want to take Dick in your drafts. That's okay. But 2% is an insane situation. He should go in every single 14-team league. And he's at least got to be in your, and when we do that show, the last round-ish, the bench flyer type show for 12s, he's going to be in that. Don't know how good he's going to be, but 2% is an insanely low number. and that's got to be addressed. If we talk about overvalued players, the guys that I think at the moment are probably just pushing a little bit too high, well, this list is empty. And this is because the national media hates Toronto. They ignore them all the time. I'm going to feed into your paranoia. They hate Toronto. They'll never talk anything good about Toronto. All these mainstream media in America, they ignore Canada all the time. I know, it's so bad. They're so anti-Raptors. So everyone is undervalued, except Ron Barrett. Now, Barrett is much better points in categories, and this is probably the only year where I've ever seen him from a category perspective and gone, yeah, he's actually draftable to me in category leagues because of some things we'll talk about in Under the Lens. The one that stands out to me as slightly overrated is, again, a ranking that hasn't been updated in, since 2002. He's ranked at 85 for category leagues, RJ Barrett, which I think is marginally too high. It's not too bad, but it's marginally too high on their category ranks that were legitimately done in April. So let's see when they put those numbers out, which maybe they've done today. I don't know. But he comes out as an undervalued, an overvalued player in that one specific situation of where his category rank is currently on ESPN. That is not an ideal. It's not the sort of area we want to be hitting with an RJ Barrett. That's not the one. Let's talk breakout candidates. We can reference this as however we want in terms of the way that we're going to frame these names. And they're two names that I've spoken about already, and I think they're pretty obvious. I think Immanuel Quickley signed that big contract. He was runner-up 6th man of the year 2 years ago, but has he actually fully broken out? I don't think so. I think this is it. Starting job, big contract, 30-plus minutes. Not a team that's going to make playoff noise, but I think that he can establish himself as again, I'll keep throwing back to Jamal Murray. He's not that level of player, but not far away. And the other one is Dick, because again, we just didn't see much of Dick to begin last season. He just didn't play. He was in the G League. He came up. He had some struggles. He played tank games in March and April. But Trent's gone. The opening is there. He should start. And there's a chance that he does break out. Year 2 player. We expect improvement. That's just how this usually works as a standard rule. Let's take a look at some risks across the rotation, ways that some of the things that we're predicting might go wrong. And one of them I think is at center. Again, I like a lot of these guys as undervalued players. But what if they keep Poeltl at 25 minutes and they play Olynyk 22 minutes and they go small with Barnes at center? Absolutely possible. Now, I think playing Olynyk a lot at center is pretty crazy. As much as we love what Olynyk does in fantasy, he is really bad defensively and he shouldn't really play there that much. A couple of minutes maybe against second units. But they could do it. They limited Poeltl early in the season. I think some of that was Darko changing defensive systems and getting everyone in the right spot. But they could do that. We could also see way more Bruce Brown minutes. Now, I am absolutely stunned that at the time of me recording this on September the 18th, Bruce Brown still plays for the Toronto Raptors. I did not think that we'd still be having Brown on this team after they picked up that team option, which seemed like they were doing that because they needed to trade him. And he was pretty bad after he came across from the Siakam trade. He had some knee problems. He's still only 28, but it is an expiring deal. He played 28 minutes with 17 usage, 11, 4, and 3, 0.9 steals, 0.3 blocks. And one of the big selling points in the past of Brown was assist numbers, which was never going to be high in Indiana. That was never going to happen. But it was also this guy blocks shots as a guard. As I realize I've got that wrong screen there behind me. He blocked shots as a guard. That's one of the things he used to do, and he would generate steals, and those numbers were well down. I don't think we have to pay any attention at all to Bruce Brown from fantasy perspective at this point, but they might. Now, this does not exist. I will say this again. Showcasing for trades does not exist. There's no way that the Raptors will look at this and go, we must, if we fully believe in Gradey Dick, we're just going to not play him so that we can build up Bruce Brown's value to get an extra second round pick. It is just not a thing that happens. But he could still come in with his defensive ability and thieve a few minutes off guys. I'm not really expecting that to be the case, but it's possible. One of the other things we're to look at is the end of last season when Barnes and Quickley played together, their chemistry was off. It just wasn't good. And that's okay. They were just sort of getting used to each other. But I don't know how it's going to go. What is the usage idea? Because, like I said last season, when Barnes played with Quickley and Barrett, he was the lowest usage of that trio. Barnes also saw big drops in some of his efficiency numbers last season as well. And also, they rose significantly, but then as other players arrived, as the trades went down, as new guys came in, his efficiency went back to being bad. He became a bad three-point shooter again and hovered in the middle at 33%. So let's take a look at what Barnes did last season. There are people who think that Barnes is going to take an extra leap forward this season. As you're well aware, I did not come out and tell you, yes, I think Scottie Barnes is going to have a 7 percentage point jump in threes. He's going to have a 10 percentage point jump in free throws. He's going to double his block rate and add 30% onto his rebounds. I didn't come and project that, and he did all that. I'm very happy not projecting somebody to do that, and I will continue not to project somebody to do that. I thought that Barnes' usage and assist rate would rise, and it did. But then he added everything else on, and that was fantastic. Now, I look at what Barnes did last season, 35 minutes, 25 usage, 20 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 1.3 steals, 1.5 blocks, 48 and 78. Really good numbers. Borderline first-round player, probably wouldn't take him there. Yeah, to me, he's more of a back-end second-round guy. But people will consider him in the first, and I understand that they will do that. He's currently going at that back-end second-round area. But there are a few things with Barnes here again, like that. What if he does, because he was playing in a situation where they had Dennis Schroeder as their point guard, and now it's Quickley. It is a different story. What if he is the third usage guy behind Barrett, behind Quickley? What if he's not considered that? He's more defensive. We also saw second half of the season, they moved Barnes from being a power forward help defense guy to a point of attack defense guy. And that meant that his block numbers and I think his rebound numbers also dropped. And those blocks doubled last season. What if they come down? Because who else is the point of attack defender? Quickley, no. Dick, no. Barrett, no. Poeltl protects the rim. What if Barnes has to do that again? Well, the block numbers will drop. He'll be out on the perimeter. He won't be helping as a free safety roamer. He won't be doing that. The three-point shooting, what if that 2-month run of 40% doesn't happen and he stays as a 31% shooter? I would say, and again, you can call me a hater, you can call me whatever. I would say there is more downside in Barnes this season than there is upside. I don't think that he becomes from 25 usage 29. I don't think that 28 and 6 becomes 25, 8 and 7. I don't think that those blocks can go higher. The steals, maybe. I'm not convinced that the shooting necessarily gets better, although maybe he becomes a consistent 37% shooter. I don't think any of those things are absolutely locked in, set in stone. And the way you look at the team also, we're going on Barnes a bit because he's a high-level pick, is that they lost Siakam and Anunoby last season, and they brought in Barrett and Quickley. That's the major difference. Barrett and Quickley are way higher in usage combination compared to Anunoby and Siakam. So that 25 usage that Barnes had for the entirety of the season, what if it sits at 23? Like we did the Jazz yesterday, and Larry Marketing runs 24 usage the whole season. And he's clearly the number one offensive guy on that team. What if Barnes pulls that back a bit? What if he does have to do point of attack defense, which again, maybe that drops his blocks, maybe that bumps his steals to 1.7. That's possible. So while I've got no problem with taking Barnes in round 2, I have to look at this objectively and go, what is, apart from he's young, he's a star, he'll be better, which is like subjective fluff that doesn't mean anything. When I try to look at the numbers, what improves here? Does usage get higher? Does shooting get better? Is there more to come on assists and defensive stats? And I'd say the only one thing there that I look at is like, it maybe steals get higher. Maybe he becomes an 82% free throw guy. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm incredibly confident about that happening, because I'm not. One of the other risks, it's not really a rotation risk, but I guess it's a projection risk, is about RJ Barrett and his shot selection. But we are going to talk about that when we get in and go under the lens with Rowan. So we'll get into that. We'll get into that over there. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Now until September the 22nd, only a few days left. We've got something exciting. I talk about FanDuel all the time. They're America's number one sportsbook. Of course I do. But now it's a great offer. Every customer at FanDuel, if you place a $5 bet, you get a 3-week free trial for NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. All you need is a Google account. You got your YouTube TV base plan, and you can watch every regular season out-of-market Sunday afternoon NFL game. So get your Google account, your valid form of payment. You can go in and cancel that at any point as well if you want. And then you get access to watch 3 weeks of NFL Sunday Ticket and see what you want to do with it. So go to FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. And don't forget to gamble responsibly. I'm very intrigued about what is going to happen with Barnes this season, because that small sample we got of those guys playing together last season, look, we just don't know. Well, I don't know what it means. I don't know how these guys are going to play, what is going to be the passing hierarchy, what is going to be the on-ball hierarchy, what is going to be the usage hierarchy. I don't know. Let's talk about one of those big three, which is, it's sort of a mid three, but it is a big three. It's their big three. I heard someone, I think it was Blake Murphy, was on Dunked On, talking Raptors the other day, and saying that this year they're rebuilding, but their three main players are all on their second contracts. They're not on rookie contracts anymore. And that's a weird spot for a rebuild, meaning that your time to get things turned around is much shorter. You don't have the advantage of cheap contracts. These guys are all on their second contracts. They're all sitting between 23 and 25. They've all gotten paid. You don't have huge cap space. That's going to be interesting. Let's take Barrett under the lens. A guy that, again, has been a horrible, horrible category league fantasy producer in the past. And we saw things shift. He's always been good at points leagues. He's always been in that top 70, top 80 sort of a zone. But we also saw last season when he was in New York that they were sick of him. Thibodeau was sick of him, and he got benched. He started, but he got benched. Instead of playing 35 minutes a night, he was playing 29 minutes a night. He wasn't playing fourth quarters. And he just wasn't very good. They had other guys there. Now, when we're looking at Barrett, you can see his crafted profile there, where he's very mid defensively. He's not a good on-ball guy necessarily. The deflection numbers are really low. He's not a good rim protector. He's just not a good defender. He's a bad defender. So that's why you can't put him out point of attack, and that's why Barnes needs to do it. Offensively, he's not a good shooter. He gets to the line at a decent amount, but he's not a good free throw shooter necessarily. In fact, he was terrible in Toronto. Those numbers dropped a lot. He's you can see that his passer rating is not very high. He's not a very good passer, but he does do quite a bit with the ball in his hands. But does that drop with Quickley and Barnes both ahead of him in that area? He draws free throws at a good rate. His numbers did improve last season. The thing that you don't love to see in terms of the comparisons of players here is that the comparison there is Kyle Kuzma, the #1 guy, and Brandon Ingram, two players who can put up numbers at times, but there are significant questions about how they drive winning. And I think that is somewhat of a concern. What is interesting in this second graph here, the radar chart, which shows the percentage of plays used by Barrett, is that by far his #1 play type was spot-ups. But that takes into consideration what he did in New York. So is that going to change? Is he going to move into more handoffs or more cuts? Because him as a spot-up guy when he can't really shoot is just bad basketball. It's bad basketball from the coach. It's bad basketball from the player. So I do think that number will change and this graph shape will change. And that we'll get a different scenario there for Barrett in terms of where those numbers lie. If we look at this basketball index headshot, I've got two numbers there that I think are interesting to put up there. And these only include their numbers while they played for Toronto. On the y-axis, it's rim shot making efficiency, because that is one of the things, and we'll talk about this in a sec, that Barrett changed. And the other one is the offensive load, which is shooting, but it's turnovers and passing and ball handling and all that sort of stuff. Got 4 players on there. There's Barnes, there's Quickley, there's Barrett, and there's Dick. The guys who are expected to start who aren't Jakob Poeltl. So what you see is total offensive load. You got Barnes right at the top there, or the biggest offensive load, but it's not that big of a gap between Quickley and Barrett to Barnes. So Quickley and Barrett are basically about the same. They sit at like 37 and 36.5 for Quickley and Barrett respectively, whereas Barnes is at like 39% offensive load. So it's almost an even distribution between those 3 players. Dick obviously way down the bottom at 25. What I do want to see, what I do like here is the rim making efficiency metric they've got is that Barrett is way up the top at 1.5. Barnes sits at like 0.65 and Quickley's at about 0.48. So that rim shot making efficiency for Barrett is way up. And that is how we turn it around. If you flip to those graphs on the right-hand side, their graphs of the top one says his rim field goal attempts, so attempts at the rim per 100 possessions, and the bottom one is his three-point attempt rate, so number of three-point attempt shots he had. And if you look at last season, when he was traded, you can see a gigantic change. The three-point attempts plummeted. The rim shots went through the roof. And that is how he became good. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with his free throws, Rowan, but that change. Hey, I'm a bad three-point shooter. I will stop doing it. And he did. And I'm finishing really, really well at the rim. Let's just do that. And he did. Now, maybe he's not able to get to the rim as much as he did last season or even finish at that high rate. But that absolutely stark change in the shot selection, I think is a massive thing for where Barrett sits for the upcoming season. That's why I'm more in on him this season, because I think there is some level of sustainability in his shooting numbers. This is the radar graph of Barrett from a fantasy perspective, and the guys who are very similar have the same shape. I don't think you'd be super surprised of these players. So it's Barrett, it's Siakam, who's a low defense player with bad free throws. That's John Kuminga, a low defense player with below average free throws, who's not a terrible passer. It's Kyle Kuzma. Guess what he is? A below average free throw guy with bad defense. And it's Brandon Ingram, another insanely low defensive sort of player whose free throws, they're not bad, but they did drop last season. But that's the sort of type of player. And I think all of that makes sense. Now, Barrett, you would suggest, is probably the worst out of that group. Maybe Kuminga. But that's the area he is. So when you're looking at these players, part of the idea of these sort of graphs is that what is the value this guy brings in fantasy? But like, where do I position him? If I wanted a Siakam and didn't get him, can I just get a Barrett later and it makes more sense? Like, yes. Like, that's the sort of idea here. Like, I'm debating Ingram and Barrett. Who's got the secure role? It's Barrett. I don't know where Ingram's going to go. Maybe I'll take RJ instead of Ingram. That's, honestly, debate that I would never have had in previous seasons. But I'll have it this season. I'll consider that. So let's take a look at Barrett's just numbers from last year. Barrett, again, part of this is in New York, part of this in Toronto. I said he's 23. He's actually 24. 27 usage, 32 minutes a night, which bumped to like 34 in Toronto. He averaged 20 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists. He had putrid steal, putrid blocks. Got to 50 from the field and 71 from the line, but in Toronto it was like 54 and 67. And that 54 is because he can't hit threes, so he stopped taking them. He took the most efficient shot in the game, which is shooting at the rim, and he took more of them. So that number, I expect that his scoring might be there. The rebounds and assists might stay similar. But what you will see is that 3-point number probably drop. The field goals rise. Maybe the scoring rises as well. I don't know. And the free throws, who knows? That was weird, the way that it dropped. And then he had obviously the issue with his brother passing away, which ruined the end of his season and obviously his life. But like that, I don't think that had an impact on the free throws, and I think that can jump back up. So that's where we sit with Barrett, someone who I loved the fact that he / the coaching staff said, what am I good at? What am I bad at? Let's just do the things that I'm good at, yeah? And it worked. And I expect that given how well that it worked, I'm sure this was drilled into him, that we'll just see that continue this season. We might not, but I do think we will. In terms of injury concerns on players, I don't really think we've got too much, but I'll just mention that last season we did have Barnes and Poeltl not finish out the year. Barnes had a fractured hand, and Poeltl, I think, had a thumb ligament issue. They could have come back had the Raptors not been tanking, trying to make sure they kept their pick, which of course they did not. So they could have stayed. They could have come back. There's zero problems, I don't think, with those guys heading into this season, but I just did want to mention because they did not play at the end of last season. Let's take a look at the Raptors and their schedule now for the upcoming season and how that can impact things in fantasy. They've got 49 quality games, which is sort of middle of the pack. It's not too bad. They've got 15 back-to-backs, the second most. Not sure that impacts many of these players at all. They've got 13 weeks where they have the maximum amount of games. That's on the low side. It's not terrible, though. And their playoff schedule's mid. If you use my schedule finishing March 23rd, which is the schedule we run on the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl, the Battle Royale will finish on March 23rd. We go 3-4-3. If you finish March 30th, they go 4-3-4. If you use Yahoo default, which you shouldn't, they go 3-4-4. And if you use ESPN default, which you also shouldn't, they go 3-4-4-3, a 4-week standard playoffs. It's okay. It's nothing like, wow, that's terrible or that's brilliant or anything along those lines. Let's swing now and take a look at some of the young guys, some of the maybe dynasty values on these guys who are under the age of 23. We've spoken about Dick already. He is still under 23, obviously. Those top numbers there, they're from my Bazemore metric, which can be moved back and forward depending on contending and rebuilding, which is available on Basketball Monster. It's still in its infancy. There's still a lot of testing that's going on, but you're relatively happy with how things come out. Dick projects as a top 100 rebuilding on a rebuilding team, a top 100 type of player. His overall fantasy skill set's not ideal. I do think he's got steal and rebound upside, and he's not a terrible passer, but not realized yet. Jonathan Mobo is a top 225 player. Now, he has absolutely incredible numbers when you look at the numbers that Mobo put up in college, but he played for San Francisco, a very small college, and he had to do everything for that team. Mobo comes in, he's already 23, or he's about to turn 23, 14 and 10 with almost 4 assists and 1.6 steals, but he's only 6'6", and he probably only can play center, but he's not a good rim protector. 64% shooting is amazing. I think he's a little undersized. I do think that by the end of the year, he's at least in the rotation, and I think he starts games in March and April as this team, I think, will be bad, and I think they'll end up having to, they will end up tanking for better Cooper Flag positioning. Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper, whoever you want to throw out there. So Mobo only came out as top 225 because I worry somewhat about the skill, about the size, maybe more importantly, and the level of competition that he faced. Their first round pick, which they got in the Pascal Siakam trade, was Gary Trent III. Jakob Poeltl comes out as a top 175 dynasty player for me. Now, I don't love what Walter is as a player. In fact, he's one of those guys that, as a general rule, I don't like. He is an inefficient, long two merchant who doesn't really pass or defend that well. And look at his college numbers, like they're pretty rough. I think they're rough anyway. He's 20. He's 6'4", so he's probably a little bit undersized to play a lot at the 3. But 14 points in 32 minutes at 24 usage, 4 rebounds, a putrid 1.4 assists, 1.1 steals, and 1.1 steals in 32 minutes as a college player is not a good sign. He shot under 38% from the field and only 79% from the line. So the top 170, look, there are some interesting things about him. The 3-point volume is really good. His 3-point shooting numbers were okay. And some metrics you translated him pretty well. He is just the sort of player that I don't think translates super well to fantasy. And him being a top 175, there's a little bit of a boost there for his age and for the fact that he was taken inside the top 20. But I am not that interested in him really at all. Nor am I interested in the mighty midget himself, Jamal Shed, who is a top 275, I think, dynasty player. I know there's going to be the people who love Jamal Shed. I've had it already. Nah, he's great. Just you watch. He's going to be awesome. Yeah, sure, maybe. Probably not. He's 6 foot. He's 22 already. He played 31 minutes a game last season, had 25 usage, 13 points. He hit just 1.2 threes. Yeah, maybe he's a good 3-point shooter. I don't think he is. He had some okay 3-point shooting percentage seasons, but not consistently. He shot under 41% from the field. He's only 78 from the line. He averaged 2.2 steals and 6.3 assists. And I love the fact that he averaged those steals. That's great. That is a good indicator. But he's too small, man. Like, he's too small. I don't think he can do enough. Offensively, he reminds me of his college teammate, Marcus Sasser. He reminds me of his current teammate, Davion Mitchell. I just think they're too small, and they don't do enough, even remotely passable on offense to be good. So that top 275 for Shed is probably just... It's probably me even just being a little bit generous on that. Who is a very interesting dynasty prospect is the youngest player in the NBA, and that's Ulrich Chomsky, who played those 3 games for the Basketball Africa League. He's going to turn 19 in December. He's 6'10", power forward center. I've put up his Summer League numbers here instead of those. He played 5 games in Summer League, but he played 3 games in that Basketball Africa League last season. He played 19 minutes in Summer League with 11 usage. He averaged 5 points and 5 rebounds in 19 minutes. That's whatever. 0.2 steals, but 1.4 blocks. 50% shooting, 44 from the line is bad, but he shot well from the line in the BAL, so I don't really know where to go with that. But he's ridiculously young. I think he's got shooting upside, rebounding upside, blocking upside. He's got no idea what he's doing. He'll get some minutes in April, I'm guessing. He's incredibly young, but it could also just turn into absolutely nothing. He's currently on a 2-year, two-way contract, Shamshi. I've got him as a top 200 dynasty guy, but if we're talking dynasty rookie drafts, I would push him ahead of a lot of guys just because, in 3 years' time, he's the same age as Jamal Shed. In 4 years' time, he's the same age as Jonathan Mobo. And who knows what happens in that development time. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But I want to see it, and there are enough positive signs there for me to have a level of interest in him. Let's talk about risk versus reward. There wasn't like a major standout guy where I go, well, this guy's clearly the biggest risk-reward guy, but I'm going to throw Immanuel Quickley as my player that I want to talk about here. And he's been a focus of a lot of what we've done on the show today. His category league variance, this is not based on minutes or injuries or games played. It is based on the individual stats. There was a 56 spot ranking variance with him. There was a 6.5 fantasy point variance as well. Now, I'll go through, like, Scottie Barnes had a 7.2 fantasy point difference, but only a 35 ranking slot difference. Quickley's best case pushes top 20. Worst case is 75. Right, that's how those numbers shook out. I could look at RJ Barrett, who had a 5.6 fantasy point difference as well. That's sizable. His category rank difference was 57th. And he's another one that was relatively high variance. But Quickley's the one here that I think, of course, like, he could come in and shoot poorly, be the third offensive option usage-wise, and cede ball handling to Barnes and just sort of sits there as a 19 points, 5 assist player with bad field goals. Or he could go 24, 7, probably not 24, 22, 2.5, 3 threes, 7.5 assists, get to 45 shooting and be a top 30, top 20 player. So whether you're taking that risk reward on Quickley is going to depend on a lot of what you've done earlier and what you've done later and where you're getting him. But I do think that he's a relatively volatile player. And now we look at some of the older players, the over-the-hill guys, because as you know, once you hit the age of 29, the production does start to dip. And there are 3 players on this team who fit that bill. One of them is fantasy legend Kelly Olynyk. And last season, when Poeltl went down, Olynyk started, and we used him in fantasy. Olynyk, who I'm almost certain that Masai traded for him because he's Canadian, and extended him because he's Canadian. He's 33. He's 6'11". He averaged 10 and 5 with 4.5 assists. He shoots well from the line. He shoots well from the field. He hits threes. He's a perfect fantasy player in terms of like where he contributes right across the board. But I don't think he's getting enough minutes. I don't think he's playing 24 a night. I think there'll be times when he does, and he's going to be an elite stream guy, but that's about it. We can talk about the other guy, or one of the other guys that was on that list, one of the former permanent monsters across fantasy, and that's Chris Boucher, who is done. He's cooked. He's toasted. He sucks. He's one of the guys that I hated talking about for fantasy because there were people who get so upset. Nick Nurse, why aren't you playing this guy? He's so good. And my answer was he's not that good. But he does put up fantasy numbers. And we'd see him, and then he'd get an opportunity, then he'd stink. And then he'd put up good numbers again. And he has fallen off. He used to take a lot of threes. He doesn't anymore. His usage is down. His shot blocking is down. He averaged half a block a game in 14 minutes. That is not Boucher. But he's different now. He's 32, amazingly. I just don't think he's really going to play at all. I don't think we're going to see much out of Boucher this season whatsoever. And I think that dream is cooked. I could go in and tell you about Garrett Temple on the decline, but the man's been on the decline for 10 years. He's 38. He's here as a locker room guy. He'll probably play some minutes when they're tanking, but that's April, March. He is not there to play. He's just not. Simple as that. We've gone through most of the Raptors players. Bruno Fernando is on this team. I haven't really talked about him. Maybe we'll just bring up some of his numbers. I think that there is, like, with Bruno Fernando on this team, and I just went through Boucher and Olynyk, I think Fernando is a solid enough backup center who actually could play those minutes instead of Kelly Olynyk, meaning Olynyk's maybe just a backup 4, and Boucher has no role whatsoever. The lob threat legend, Bruno, like, he's a field goal guy, he blocks shots, he rebounds. He's the stereotypical center. That's what he does. So he's one of those guys that's on this team. Like, the other one who's going to be in the rotation and get backup minutes is Davion Mitchell, who's also really quite bad. Mitchell played only 15 minutes a night, saw his spot taken by Keon Ellis in the rotation. He couldn't even get steals last season. He can't shoot. He doesn't pass that well. He had 15 usage. He's already 26. Unbelievably. I hated him as a draft prospect. He's been worse than I anticipated. But he's on this team. And what will happen though, if Quickley gets hurt, he's going to have to be the guy. And what that means is then we pay attention because maybe he gets 1.5 steals. Maybe he gets 5 assists. Maybe he gets 17 points. But they are very thin at that point guard position because it's Mitchell or it's Shed. And Shed is Mitchell, but without any NBA experience at all. There's one more guy that I just need to touch on because he played minutes last season and it's Ochai Agbaji, and he is also bad. A guy that came in as a shooter who just can't shoot, 41% from the field, 66% from the line. He played 21 minutes a night last season. What he turned into was a really good transition defender who plays the 3-4. He came in as a shooting guard. Okay, shooting guard who bombs threes, and he cannot do that. He can't pass. He doesn't, 0.6 blocks in 21 minutes for a guy that's 6'5" is very impressive. But where does he play? Maybe he's Barrett's backup? Maybe? Just could he start over... I didn't even consider that Ochai Agbaji could be the starter over Dick. That would make no sense to me at all. He's 4 years older. He's way worse. He cannot shoot. But it's possible. I didn't even consider that. Maybe he does start instead of Dick. And we would not touch him at all. He is one of the worst fantasy players in the NBA. He's actually one of the worst NBA players in the league at the moment. And one of the worst fantasy players. It would shock me if he cracked the top 300 Ochai Agbaji this season. And that is the Raptors. So let's go through some of this stuff. There's a lot of risk with some of these players. I like Barnes at the back end second round. I think if you go early second, late first, it's a little early. There are probably, and is how I like to view players. When we look at the numbers and the projections, there are more things where I say, well, that can go wrong versus, well, this could improve. And that's not a great sign. I like Quickley, who I think might crack top 35, but I wouldn't pick him there. We're looking in the 50s, 60s in both points and categories. Poeltl is underrated. I think he's an 80s sort of a player versus the hundreds where he's ranked at the moment. Barrett, could he be top 50 in points? Possibly. Is top 80 too high in categories? Also possibly, but he's 100% draftable this season, Ryan Barrett. Dick is a great late flyer who you can get. And then you're talking about guys like Olynyk and Brown and Mitchell, Fernando, Agbaji, and the other garbage that's at the back end of this roster, DJ Carton. Brandon Carlson's an interesting player. He's a stretch big man, stretch center who's on a two-way. I don't think we're going to see much out of him. But that's where we sit with your mates, the Toronto Raptors. Don't forget, if you love Toronto like I do, haven't been to Toronto, actually. Maybe I'll go one day. I should. I'm sure you guys would throw a big party for me. And as you're well aware, this is all jokes. This is all jokes. And I'll save that to the end because I'm sure someone won't take it that way. Thumb it up. Leave your comments down below, guys. We are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.